Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Greet the Week. This is Jan Moray, and I have my co-host here, Mona Duncan.
Hello, hello.
And we have a couple other guests. We have Bob Hoagland here, and another guest who I will keep incognito unless she decides to let everybody know who she is. And today, what we're going to talk about, well, I'm starting off saying, wouldn't it be nice if coworkers automatically respected you when they met you and bosses appropriately rewarded you for a job well done? I mean, when you're in school, it seems like we're awarded so many accolades, and teachers make sure that we're given the respect and recognition for a lot of things that we do, and our parents are real good about letting us know what we do well. But then we get out into the real world, and it's like every time you meet somebody new, you got to start over and make yourself, make people respect you and listen to you. Anybody else find this to be the case when you're out in the real world?
Well, not really.
Not really? Okay.
I mean, maybe it goes back to what we expect. I was looking on your, your blurb whenever you wrote out about what we'd be talking about this week. And you put that, you want to be respected and appreciated. And I think it goes back to pretty much how we feel about ourselves. Okay. That if we want others to respect us, and then you go on to talk about how that often we're unappreciated, and then we become defensive, and then we can be too sensitive in trying to settle the expectations and so forth. And I got to thinking about how difficult is it for us to actually receive a compliment, or to receive a welcoming gesture, or to even receive a promotion. And so we have to get back and look at that. Maybe we're receiving more respect and more appreciation than we're allowing ourselves to know that we are.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I guess what I had in mind when I wrote that, and I've talked about this a few times on these broadcasts, is that in my early years out of college, I was in a male-dominated field, and I came in very positive, thinking very highly of myself and my abilities, but it just, I ran into quite a bit of resistance. I mean, there were obviously some people who were willing to give me the benefit of the doubt and work with me, but there were others who just did not want to give me any credit for anything, and I had to really work hard. So I did see both sides of it.
Mm-hmm. And the thing, I'm just throwing this out for a kind of to think about, okay, is that sometimes, that our esteem, the way we think about ourselves, the way we feel about ourselves, and also the way we see how other people are responding to us and so forth. Mm-hmm. And that maybe that low esteem, that, maybe that high esteem can be real off-putting.
Yeah.
And it is, as we begin to be really aware of the feedback that we receive, and we begin to think, maybe I need to take this down a peg or two, that I do know a lot, whether it's a female cohorts or male cohorts or whatever it is. I do know a lot, but maybe if I'm coming in, I worked with a local radio station here a few years ago, and there was a gentleman there, it was a radio and TV, and there was a gentleman there that had a new cohort coming in, just graduated from Baylor University with all these accolades, and it was a Baylor University TV station that was there. And so anyway, they were having all kinds of conflict, just the young guy just out of college and the older guy that was closing in on retirement. And I had done some training with the organization before, and so the station manager asked me to meet with those two and to see what we could do to have more cohesiveness. And before we even met, I sent an email to each of them, got their email addresses, and sent an email to each of them. And I asked them some questions to think about so that whenever we got together, we'd have something to a starting place. And I put on there, what was your expectations of the job? What do you perceive your coworkers' expectations of the job to be? What do you perceive the manager's expectations of the job to be? And then I asked, what do you like about your job? What do you dislike about your job? What do you like about your coworkers? What do you dislike about your coworkers? So that we could have a place to get to. And then how do you want your job to empower you? How do you want it to help you grow? For you to kind of come out with those things. And then where do you excel in your job that maybe that maybe it wouldn't add to your growth? So anyway, sent all that out to them, and we made an appointment to get together, and the manager was meeting with us. And so we went in, had a dinner meeting, and we sat down at the table. And whenever I came in and sat down, the young man who was, he says, everything's already solved. It's already been settled.
Okay.
Because they determined individually, you know what? Maybe if my expectations are being met in ways that I'm not willing to look at them being met.
Yeah. And I think that's a critical thing about, let's talk about it. Let's talk it out and discuss it. Because in the situations that I had, I did not get aggressive or upset when people did not respect me right away at the beginning, even though it just caught me totally by surprise. I'm like, well, I don't deserve to be treated like this, and so, but I continued to treat them respectfully and to work with them. And I guess that was the point that I was trying to make for today's show, for us to talk about, is that so we see so much out there where people are disagreeing with each other, and you're not trying to find common ground. You're not trying to find, okay, what are you really looking for? What are you expecting? And then when you have that discussion and talk about it, you're really not as far apart as you think you are.
Right. And
like you were saying too, you come in with certain expectations, and so. But if we can talk through it instead of you just keeping those expectations in your head, then you may figure it out on your own that maybe this is a relationship that I can deal with.
Right. And it's that expectations, it's also that respect. It's respecting yourself, but it's choosing to respect everyone else, whether they act respectful or not.
Right.
And more than deserving it, it is earning it.
Mm-hmm.
It's earning that respect. It is earning it, and it's earning it by not being put off by someone else's resistance to you. Yeah. And it is not being offended by the way they treat you, and think it through. And how can I respond to that negative treatment in a way that would be not off-putting against off-putting?
Yeah. Because you still feel offended. That feeling of being offended is a signal that there's been an exchange that's gone on that didn't sit quite well with you.
Right.
And so, but it's like, don't just keep that in your head, or think about it in different ways, not just the first way that comes to mind, and try to understand where they're coming from, and maybe talk it through with them and let them know you didn't like what they said, and tell me, is this what you really meant?
Right. But also give a little space there.
Yeah.
So, so that it's not, so that if the atmosphere is kind of icy and not that welcoming, don't barge into it right then.
Right.
Have enough respect for yourself to calm down, think about it, and to consider both sides.
Right.
Yours and the managers and, the job description, just all sides.
Perceptions play such a huge role.
Yes.
And obviously I was not a young female in the workplace.
You weren't. Oh.
But when I first started teaching, I looked about 10 years younger than I was. And even the security guard several times told me I couldn't park in faculty parking.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I first got involved in the Institute, I was, 30 years old. And I looked, 21, 22, which I wish I did now, but that's a whole nother story. But so for the first year or so, I was just, bobbing Arizona. And then the board was restructuring, and there was nobody really running for the board. And there's a little bit of politics behind it. But the executive director at the time said, well, hey, you're young. Why don't you run for it? Well, there was really no competition. So all of a sudden, within 2 years, I'm on the board of directors. And all of a sudden, people who wouldn't talk to me before were my best friend. So I had almost the opposite of, are they respecting me because of me? Are they respecting the title? Do they just want something? And I had never, I mean, I'd been in that position in sports, but never in terms of business or life outside of a sporting event. And that was kind of difficult too, with the perceptions and dealing with it. And, you know, I mean, obviously I worked it out eventually, but it's a very uncomfortable situation there. And the perceptions that people get, especially in any kind of a competitive environment, of the rumors start flying and people hear one thing about you and say something about you. And then it does become back to exactly what you've said from the opposite side of, well, what do I do about it? What do I have control over?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I know whenever I was on staff as the outreach minister, and they had some ladies' meetings, and I know what my personal agenda was. I did not want to be seen as a woman's pastor, simply because the message that, you know, the message of the gospel, the message of reality therapy, the message of psychology, the message of life in general is that we're all, you know, it's applicable to everyone. And there was some that saw me as being a elitist or something like that. And so I just had to continually deal with my own attitude. You know, how am I projecting this? Or, you know, and maybe it's a both and. Are they reading things that's not there? Or am I projecting something that is there that I'm not even aware of? Yeah. And then when I got to work with the prison system, and there, you know, it is 85% male. Not only in staff, but definitely with the inmates. There are some women that come through. That was the whole different thing, you know. It was a whole different thing in that being a part of, and that's whenever I came up with the earning respect. You know, you can demand it, but it doesn't work.
Right.
That's just like with anything else. And so I choose to respect you, whether you're respectful or not. And I choose to treat you civilly. And even if I do have to, you know, it's learning to be assertive, firm yet kind. Even if I have to get in your face about something, then it's over with. It is over with. As soon as it's done, then we're back on more of an even keel of human to human, regardless of the skin color, regardless of the religion, regardless of the ethnicity, of the education, just regardless. It's human to human.
Yeah.
And interacting on an even playing field. And after a while, it begins to communicate that.
You know, but then it starts with you to make that change, and when you come in expecting to be respected, because I mean, yes, you have to earn respect to keep it, but when we meet people, if you come in with the attitude that I'm going to respect you from the beginning and treat you respectfully at first until you do something that shows me that I don't need to respect you,
right?
So you lose the respect. And so, but if you're the person not receiving the respect at the beginning, because it doesn't always happen. There's people that do have preconceived ideas of whether they want you in the job or not, or whether they want to deal with you or not. And sometimes you will run into people who don't, as much as you try, as much as you believe in yourself and believe that you're going to do a good job, and then you run into this resistance.
You know, and the thing that both...
How do you deal with it? And making sure that you're dealing with it in a positive way instead of getting defensive and combative.
You know, you both said something, and I just want to really solidify it because I think it's huge. And that is that, I mean, we obviously say it, and sometimes it sounds trite, but that the only person we can control is ourselves.
Go figure.
So let's say, Jan, that you then no longer respect somebody because they've given you several reasons not to. going back to the point that you both said, though, if you're going to be a respectful person, you can still treat them respectfully.
Yes, exactly.
And or what's the next best thing? Well, I'll use Mona's word. At least I can treat them civilly.
Right,
Because the thing I think we miss sometimes in the whole choice theory is Glasser always said is if you want a relationship with somebody, not you had to like everybody in the whole world and be best friends. But when you're in a working environment, obviously it's to your best interest to get along with as many people as possible, both for the business purpose and personally. But
exactly. And in looking at relationship, I mean, I just like to expand it. It's not just people. You know, what does it mean to relate? And what do we relate to? Well, sometimes we have these disagreements in the workforce and even in marriage and everything else is because we relate to time in a way that the other person doesn't relate to.
Yeah.
And what we may see is their time wasting. You know what? I mean, they may not be wasting it as much as what we're seeing it from our perception. And it just, there's so many factors that go into everything. I'm sorry, go ahead, Bob.
Oh, no, I said, what do you mean? You're supposed to be doing everything at my speed and my pace.
Right.
I mean, you're right. We fall into that so easily.
Yeah, and it's so much more. I mean, it's the personality. It's the whole, you know, the everything. And then I just so personally believe that life is fair. You know, whether you want to call it the golden rule or hocus pocus or karma or whatever, I think we get back what we give. And so if we don't like what we're getting back in any situation, stop and look at what we are giving or how it is or how we're sending it forth. And back to the job, you know, why did we go into the particular field? Was it because it was a lot of good money? You know, I've heard it's going to really be money, bring in the money, or is it in keeping with our natural gifts and talents? And we may be just mad at the job and taking it out on everybody else. You know, I mean, there's just so many factors there to look at.
You know, one of the reasons why I chose this topic is I was talking to somebody recently who was pretty upset about losing her job, and then she was telling me the dialogue between her and some of her coworkers. And I just shake my head and saying, well, your combative attitude, you know, I can understand why they would respond in the way that they did. Of course, she didn't like it when I said that. But,
well, did you just tell her or did you ask her, and what was your attitude? Sometimes we need to help them self-evaluate for themselves.
Well, I mean, we talked about it. I said, it was because she was telling me what she had said, and I said, did you say it that way? And she goes, well, yeah. I said, okay, so what? How do you think somebody would respond if you start attacking them and telling them you did this and you did this, or what are you trying to accomplish, and where you're putting somebody on the spot? Because as soon as you put somebody on the defensive, it's the dukes go up, and I'm going to fight you because you're now insulting me. And in the experience that I had, it's, yes, you let the person know that you don't appreciate what they're doing, but you do it in a civil manner, and you talk about it and you discuss it, where you're talking through your issues. I mean, when you're running straight to human resources, everybody gets all upset because it's like, well, why did you get them involved? And you know, we could have discussed this on our own and kept it quiet. And that's kind of the message that you know, I was trying, that I really, my intent for this was to let people know that yes, there are a lot of different ways to respond to situations, and you do have to step back and think about, okay, how important is this relationship, and what do I want out of it, and what am I willing to give, and what am I willing to do? And if you don't really care, it's your attitude, your thoughts, and your feelings are foremost, and I'm going to let everybody know how I feel, well, then you're going to have to suffer the consequences, because it's a two-way street. And you know, and another thing with working, I remember there was one guy, one of my direct reports, really wasn't doing a good job, and I tried to work with him to get him to understand what the expectations were and stuff, and we ended up terminating him. And my boss was real nervous, and he said, you know, you need to document everything you're doing because I've terminated 3 people and they've all 3 ended up in lawsuits. And I said, well, this is the 3rd person I'm terminated, and mine have never entered into a lawsuit.
Right.
So that goes to, you know, how do you treat the person? It's, you know, even if you are absolutely in the right, and of course, who judges that? But you know, if the majority would say that you're absolutely in the right, once you start cutting people down and accusing them and getting real nasty, you're losing the battle.
Can be 100% right according to the rules and the regulations and the job description and all that stuff, and yet 100% incorrect in relationship building.
Yeah.
And in relating to a human being as a human being, whether they have met the job requirements or not.
Right.
And it's, you know, so it's backing off a little bit. It's going with that pause button. It is, and I keep thinking about Dr. Glasser's definition of happiness, which we're all seeking happiness in no matter what way it's in. And that we think of, you know, you relate to and you talk about, like with a couple or so forth, that opposites attract. But you know what? That's not just in marriage. Opposites attract, yes, but they also complete. And so even in the workforce, we are paired with people that we are opposite in a lot of ways, but yet our gifting and our understanding of the situation completes, and it makes it more complete than just seeing everything as cookie cutter, cut and dried.
Yeah.
And it's learning to appreciate that and being able to look at it and take the bits and pieces that is good for the whole.
May I interject a question?
Sure.
So we're obviously all on the same page in terms of the only person we control is ourselves. I've said that more now than I have in the past 6 months. But what do you do when you're dealing with, say, a coworker, whatever, who doesn't believe that? They're the victim all the time. Everybody's out to get them. What would you suggest from the internal point of view?
Well, my personal response is always, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Because sometimes they just need a little sympathy. They just need to have their ego soothed. I am so sorry to hear that. You know, and I can see how that would hurt. And sometimes, well, finally, you know, and maybe, and that's not a con. I am genuinely sorry. You know, even if it's me, you know, if I've been dissed, and I have a little compassion for me too. I'm sorry to hear that someone thinks you're mad whenever you were just being assertive. You know, and it's taking that time to think it through and to take it seriously, personally myself, without being offended. And yes, I do ask quite frequently, whose behavior can you control?
Yeah.
And whose attitude can you control? So, okay, I'm just asking that to the general audience. So you answer me. Whose behavior can you control? Okay, one of you's pointing to yourself.
So people who don't really follow choice theory and believe that. I mean, you will ask somebody that question, whose behavior can you control?
Just answer me, okay?
And they always say,
you are my unknowing audience, okay? Okay. So, whose behavior can you control? Answer me. Whose behavior can you control? You're an unknown.
I guess mine.
My own?
Really?
I guess mine.
No,
Really?
it's not again.
Can
Everything else is information.
Yeah.
See, I stopped right then and there. Whose behavior can we control? Can you control? Can I control? Really? Are you sure? And you know what? They'll tell me all the time, yeah, you can. And how often do we?
Yeah.
And you know what? I'm looking in that mirror just as much as I'm looking at you. And you are that mirror. Even when my mirror is not here, guess what? You're the one that's reflecting me to me.
I think our guest was trying to say something. Did you want to say something?
Well, she was.
Me?
She was interacting. She was
Yeah,
being
yeah,
the non-knowing. Go ahead.
yeah. No, I just said the only person I can control is me. Everything else is information.
Yeah.
So whenever I meet another person, I apply those rules. And when I choose to behave differently, I go back to square one and rule one applies. I'm in control of myself,
Mm-hmm.
and everything else is information.
And if you're wanting to know how to handle it right in the middle, I mean, be surprised. Really? Really? I can control me?
Yep.
But does that mean you can control you? Well, can we maybe, come about this in a way where we're both more amenable at looking, can we sit down and talk about this as person to person, human to human, co-worker to co-worker, child to mom, to whatever. And, most are, matter of fact, whenever we can get out, whenever we can get ourselves out, and whenever we can help that other person get himself out of that emotional snit, then, and it doesn't take a long pause. It just takes a small pause for our emotions to subside so that thinking can go back to the brain and we can get oxygen up there and we can be more reasonable. And if not, then you know what? It's time to say, hey, I need a pause here. I need a break. I need a little break here. I don't know quite how to discuss this with you right now. And I would rather have a discussion rather than a argument. Just giving yourself a timeout. Giving along happiness. The second point of first point of happiness is doing something with your life that is fulfilling to you. The second point of happiness is getting along reasonably well with those near and dear to you. And is a coworker near and dear? Well, in the long run, yeah, they are.
Well, you need them. You need them in a different way than you need family members, but you need to be able to get along, to work together, to settle your differences.
Mm-hmm. And are you doing something with your life that you feel is worthwhile? Mm-hmm. Do you feel that this job is worthwhile? And this is the job description, and will that fill your worthwhile basket? If not, do we need to discuss things further? Do we need to go to another department? And again, you're going back to what was the issue, back to working with those, do you need more training? Sometimes it's just I don't have enough training. I really, I like the job and all this, but I'm not getting the acknowledgement. Well, maybe there's a little bit more training we need there. Then if we're looking at lead management, we go back with what can we provide for them? Well, if it's our child, we look at, what can we help them? What skills? Or as Alpha Jim said, more information. What more information? And then the fifth one, or the fourth thing of happiness, is not doing anything that would keep the other one from
getting their needs
obtaining happiness or pursuing happiness.
Yeah.
And as we can calm down and look at it from a more rational, a less toxic point of view, maybe we are doing something to keep others from being productive in their field.
Well, it goes back to all that self-evaluation, to look at to see what kind of progress you're making or not making, and so what am I doing? That's helping? What am I doing that's not helping so much? And what can I change? And so you're looking inside to see what can I do, instead of constantly taking that victim role and looking at what everybody else is doing, or everybody else is not doing that you need for them to do, though it's very, very easy to fall into that mode, to try to get something from somebody else. I mean, it's hard to keep saying, okay, I'm responsible and I need to do something about it. And yes, I know that's what I need to do, but some days I want somebody else just to step in and do something, right?
Right.
Jan?
Yes.
When I face a person, or am I in a conversation with a person whose behavior I find challenging, I don't see it as a conflict between the person and me, because after all she gives or he gives is information.
Mm-hmm.
It is rather a conflict with the belief systems that I was brought up and have taken in unquestioned as a young child probably, and now growing up, starting to become assertive, and there is conflict between my new beliefs or my new pictures I form and I feel are more comfortable with me, and the old pictures that I should quote unquote follow, like the world has to be fair. That's a belief. It's a perception. Does the world, do things have to be right? So it's better to give than to take. Always be the giver. They are a more valuable person. Oh, Jesus will love you more if you're a good person and you are giving. But heaven's sakes, whenever you take, you need to give back in the same amount that you have taken. And all beliefs, when there's a conflict with another person, in the end, it might rather be an inner conflict of old pictures that I have taken in without questioning them, without evaluating them, and new things coming up. So it's more an inner conflict because I cannot change the other person.
Right. Yeah, but then that goes back to let's have a conversation about it. Let's discuss it. Let's understand that your belief system or your values are different from mine. Because until we talk about it, understand where the other person is coming from, you may start thinking of some things that are totally wrong. But this has been a good discussion. I think we're over on our time, and a lot of food for thought here. Any last comments that anybody would like to bring up before we close for today?
Yes, I want to end with one little thing.
Okay.
And, well, two things, actually. It was this weekend I went to see a play, The Diary of Anne Frank.
Oh, okay.
And, 2 years, 6 people in just a small area that was not able to leave the house at all. They were hiding, and the sirens constantly going off, and the raids and all this kind of stuff. And yet how Anne Frank, in the midst of all of that, she kept believing that everyone, was good at the core, that we could just all get along if we would just try.
Yeah.
And it just goes hand in hand with, and it is different belief systems. And some people, we have different personalities, and there are those that find it very, very difficult, and others that find it even easy, somewhat easy. And not too long ago, I was reading an article about health and eating and so forth, and it said that if you eat less, you age more graciously, that your body doesn't take as much food as we Americans give our bodies. And it was encouraging you to consciously be aware of eating 25% less. But all through the article, it kept saying this is not sustainable. Oh. It's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. And you know what? I found that to be very encouraging. That be aware of the fact that, the plate is this full, and how could we reduce it by 25%? Be aware of that. Yet at the same time, I think I did it again. Yeah. At the same time, being aware of the fact that you can't forever keep reducing your plate by 25%, 25%, 25%, 25%. It's not sustainable.
Oh,
and it's realizing
it that way. Yeah.
Right. And to me, it just made a correlation with the fact that, it seems impossible that you can be aware of the fact that you can think new thoughts. That was even one of the things that Anne Frank said in her diary was, I just think everybody could change their thoughts. I just think everyone could change their thoughts. And I thought, oh, yay. And we can. We'll change our thoughts about ourselves and also change our thoughts about others. Yeah. But as we think, but it's not sustainable, I find comfort from both of those. It's like, yeah, I can go in to do something. Maybe I can do a little bit of it, even if I can't do the whole thing.
Well, it takes time to get people to change their thoughts, especially when they're beliefs that they've had for many, many, many years. And they're not just going to change it overnight or even a few months. It takes time. And then maybe if I know somebody who is even a different religion or different race or has a totally different value system from me, where we're in conflict at the beginning, I can become friends with this person, but it's going to take a long time. It's going to take some time for them to get to understand that we have different views, and it's okay. It's all right. We can agree to not agree on several topics, but we can still work together. We can still get along. We can still do things. So that's a good note to get your week started. That even the most difficult of people, you can find some common ground, and it may take some time, but have that discussion. Don't just write them off. Have that discussion, and see where you can go. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining, and we'll see you next week.